Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to our truly global audience joining us today. Welcome to the second of our four webinars in the AI in Action series entitled ChatGPT's Impact on Finance, Accounting, and Procurement. If you missed the first webinar entitled Supercharge Your Outdated Systems with ChatGPT, it's available at softura.com/webinar. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know that attendees are muted with cameras off, and we'll have the question and answer section open throughout the webinar. I'm your host, Jim Edwards, an advanced technology account executive, and joining me is our presenter, Frank Brasky, our chief evangelist for AI, IoT, and robotic process automation. Hey, Frank.
Hey, Jim, thanks for having me.
Welcome. So over the next 45 minutes, Frank will share insights on the inner workings of ChatGPT and how it can impact the performance of your finance, procurement, and accounting functions. Frank will showcase examples of integrating generative AI into these applications that are far beyond what most companies have envisioned. Frank will give overviews of Microsoft Copilot and cite a few examples of its use. Frank will then give you a glimpse into the future state of business applications using generative AI and ChatGPT for essential functions such as finance, marketing, and procurement. For those of you midway through an application development or modernization process, you'll be taking in a lot of information today, and we encourage you to pause and consider the opportunities presented. It could redefine your plans and help you to create something far better than your current trajectory. So let's delve into how you can use generative AI in finance, accounting, and procurement and embrace a future powered by generative AI. Frank, the audience is yours.
All right. I won't go through all the details of this slide, but suffice it to say, I've been in the industry for over 32 years now, and I've worked for most of the tech titans that have anything to do with artificial intelligence or machine learning in this space, including the military and others. I have some experience with these things, including all the way starting back with IBM Watson, and of course, the Google assistants and Alexa and Cortana and Siri.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
When these initial bots became available, they really were quite a big thing, and everybody was really surprised and excited about their possibilities. But over time, as people have used them, they realized there's some things that they just don't quite do correctly, and they never seem to learn. One of the things that they're lacking the most is just this concept of context. And so we've started to be worried about eavesdropping and talking in front of our listening agents, because you never know what advertisement might come up on your phone next or tablet about something that you've been talking about. So about 70% of people feel that these services are not adequate. And these have really been kind of the holy grail for computer science for a very long time. We've been trying to have these virtual assistants for a number of years. And it hasn't been until up recently that we've had the ability to actually do something about this to provide a better solution. And part of that solution really has to do with context. Many of the times, the bots or the agents that we're dealing with don't understand your situation, your role, what you're doing, etc. Through the magic of natural language processing and large language models, which you may have heard of, like Llama or GPT-3 or GPT-4 and Bard, etc., those are systems that actually help make natural language processing easier through natural language generation. Because now that the systems can understand us, we can now understand them with interesting information coming back. You pile that on top of a reasoning engine, and then if you add the ability to have access to your own data in a secure way, you really get something powerful. And that's what we're going to show you this afternoon. This is a report done by PricewaterhouseCoopers with self-reported data dealing with several hundred agencies, talking to folks in these various budget areas. They were concerned with what can we do in terms of thinking about the areas that we can automate, as well as areas that we're wasting time. I was actually shocked by the amount of time wasted according to the surveys. We've got management reporting and financial reporting. You've got investment advisors and forecasters looking at how are we doing, how's the company doing. Whether you're a public company, you have to do SEC filings, or if you're a private company and you're just reporting to the board or to your owners. There's a lot of reporting that has to happen, a lot of time related to how often or how long does it take you to close your books at the end of a month or a quarter or even a year. The amount of time that you can squeeze out of that makes such a big difference for a lot of different functions. We've got risk management, accounting, credit risk management. We've got fraud systems out there. We now have the capabilities to do first use fraud. So even before you've ever used a credit card, they can tell if it's a fraudulent attempt or not, just because of the patterns. People are fairly predictable. Even though it may not be used specifically, people that do this and that tend to do certain things. We've also got a lot of capabilities coming around in the accounts payable and accounts receivable space. I'll talk a little bit about that with the billing and payables, receivables, and the three-way matching problem. We have an ROI story for that. And then last but not least, budgeting, forecasting, financial strategy, and planning. I have to laugh at the financial strategy planning, how the majority of 11% is wasted time, and there's no potential for automation. That was done clearly before the advent of these latest technologies, because now that's actually one of the greatest things that they're used for, is finding out information and starting to forecast into the future. So I think that'll change over time. So all in all, if you add these all up, they report that there's roughly a 40% cost savings opportunity or an improvement in efficiencies, however you want to look at it. If you add that up over the course of several companies, that's a lot. One of the places that people go to look at cutting budgets is in the IT space. I happen to be very aware of that because that's the world we live in. But when I'm thinking about that and what kinds of jobs are out there, et cetera, there's over 110,000 open jobs right now from Amazon, Microsoft, and Google Cloud providers looking for software engineers in these spaces. And this is just one little small sample size from just LinkedIn. So this is not a comprehensive thing. This is just what's out there right now. So it's not a bad time to be a computer scientist. However, I was completely humbled when I started to research and understand what was going on with respect to the finance, accounting, and procurement jobs. There's over 1.1 million jobs outstanding. And this is just in the US. So this means people like you are out there, you've either got open recs or you're looking for folks, you've lost folks. There's a whole lot of things going on. But that's 1.1 million jobs that are available for people that know how to do things with finance, accounting, and procurement. If you take that in aggregate and multiply it out, you see that it ends up being somewhere between an opportunity or a savings of roughly 24 billion. It seems like it's a lot, but it pales in comparison to the 7% GDP growth many analysts are predicting that this kind of AI will bring to the global economy. And when you talk about 7% of GDP, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. It's quite a significant opportunity, and that's what we'll talk about today. As we're going through and I'm showing you these things, I'd like you to think about what would a 40% reduction in costs or increase in efficiency mean to you and your organization? How do you come up with this number? People talk numbers all day long. Where are they getting these? We'll go through and talk about that. So unless you've been living under a rock, you've heard about this thing called ChatGPT by OpenAI and how it's going to be the end of the world and how we're all going to make millions and it'll all be great. There's a tremendous hype cycle out there. People love to hate ChatGPT. People love it. We use it all the time, and I use it as well as its brethren Bing and Bard and Copilot. Talk a little bit more about that. But what ChatGPT is, it's a system for allowing you to generate information, get text summarizations, interpret spreadsheet data, provide context for your business data, allows you to figure or reason and pass logical tests, as well as real tests like the CPA exam, in addition to answering questions and being conversational, much more so than the typical chatbot that you might have experienced up until now, where either it really isn't a chatbot, it's actually a person, or if it is a chatbot, it's not particularly helpful. I've experienced that many times. I'm sure some of you have. In addition to that, it can interpret and do language translations and do things in different styles and tones and whatnot. But the most fascinating to me is this ability to predict and to go and find things based on your current and your past situations, and then being able to look through the data and find the patterns to say, here's what's most likely to happen with some percentages. But all in all, really the point of it is to be a human augmentation capability. It's really intended to make you smarter. I hope today you'll see that this is really the case. ChatGPT is one of the different engines that's available via Microsoft Azure OpenAI and their cognitive services. Several of the things that you'll see today are actually built on top of this. And it's quite exciting. We'll go through, you'll see a bunch of different services, and I promise this will be the last technical thing that we go through. But these are different areas of opportunity that artificial intelligence is being added into and used in the world of business and science and technology to really make things more user-friendly. To give you an idea about that, we've been using this AI technology in the world of development for about 3 years now. One of the things that people aren't really aware of is approximately 70% of all code these days is now written by AI. Some pundits say we're even at peak programmers. We may not need as many computer scientists as we once thought. Everybody thought the labor force was going to be all about the jobs that could be automated via robots. Nobody saw the knowledge worker opportunity happening. So now we'll go into a real quick demo. We're going to go and look at some financials. All right, so we have typical spreadsheets looking at some budgets and other figures. We also, a little bit later, we'll go in and look at some text-based information because, you know, not everything is in a spreadsheet. Some things are in text, some things are in PDFs and whatnot. So we'll go and open up the browser, get into ChatGPT, and go, and we're going to choose the code interpreter. You also have the ability to have plugins, but the code interpreter is the engine behind the thing that allows you to actually analyze your spreadsheets and data and make sense of them. We'll go to the webinars directory here, and we'll pull up the right file. Sorry for this. Okay, 6400. Here we go. Okay. While it's loading, we'll put in a little message. So what can you tell me about this file? This is a very common occurrence. People get this sort of thing. You get sent a file and you're like, hey, tell me about this. What do you think? How do you go about doing that? Sometimes it's useful if you have context, but if you can look for correlations, we'll see what it will tell us. Now it's read the file and it's coming through and showing us that this particular file has this data in it, and actually showed us the little Python above it. It's got these fields: store, date, holiday sales, temperature, CPI, unemployment, etc. And in here you see, I'm clicking these show your works, it'll actually show you how it's doing what it's doing while it's telling you about the information. Now it's describing what the information is based on what it found and giving you ranges and values. It's very thorough in how it thinks about the information and tries to figure out what it's all about. Notice it saved over on the left-hand side. Now I'm going to say, okay, let's do that. The last thing it asks me here is, would you like some more detailed analysis? Would you like to proceed with that? Sure. So I'm going to create as many graphs as possible. Well, maybe not as many, because it can produce a lot of graphs. So we'll go into what it thinks are useful. Now it's going to process that. Again, I like to watch it generate the code. To me, it's like watching fire. Pretty spectacular to see how it does what it does. Now, let's go back and look at this. This is the charts that it made based on this information. And it's going in and showing me different things: violins, scatter plots, etc. Even here, it showed me that there's some errors that it ran into. We'll go and look at that. Here's these graphs that it made for us. Some of these may be useful, some of them may not. Depending on where you are, it has the ability to pretty much do anything that you could do in R or Python. ChatGPT can handle fairly easily. Okay, so with that, we'll go back over to the next section. Now we'll actually go through and show you what it looks like to analyze the data. And maybe this spreadsheet, maybe you couldn't open it, but that's not a problem for ChatGPT. So I'll go into that. And you may have seen these spreadsheets from hell, where basically it looks like they've been put together with Band-Aids and duct tape. They've got inconsistencies and data that's garbled or formulas that are suspect. All those sorts of things ChatGPT is able to actually handle. and read in. Okay, so we're going to say this one. I'll just paste in this one. We're going to look at some simple sales numbers. So it does a little bit of pre-calculation to understand what is in the file. Then it'll go and say, okay, it looks like there's no relevant data. So it's going to skip some of the initial rows and see what else is there. It's like, oh, there's a lot of what they call NaN or not a number information in there. I know that it's instructions, but it's going to go and figure that out eventually. So it says, okay, now the data seems to be starting at row 16, and we want to move through. It has a problem with that first page because it turns out there's multiple sheets in the spreadsheet. The first sheet is actually instructions. The third sheet is actually some pictures I put in there just to throw it off. But now it knows, okay, there's 3 instruction sheets, or sorry, 1 instruction, 1 sales order, and now it can get to the data. So it's like, okay, you got your unit costs, your data, your totals, your sales by region. It's figured out what the data is, and now it's giving me information about those ranges, what the values are, and it's automatically doing additional things without me having to ask. So it's done correlations and figured out additional things that I want to do. Now it's saying, you know, what I'd like to proceed with some additional analysis, and we'll skip on that for now. We'll go back to here. When you go into ChatGPT, one of the things you'll see on the main homepage is these examples and capabilities and limitations. And people are all about, oh, it's dangerous, it's this or that. Sure, it's like any tool. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. But the important thing is the capabilities that it has now. It can actually remember what has been talked about in a given conversation, as well as the ability to actually make corrections. As you're going through, you may have noticed the thumbs up or the thumbs down on the various answers that it gives. You can actually go in and tell it, no, that's not what I meant. In fact, I find errors quite often, and I'll tell it that's a problem, and we'll go back and fix it. Now we'll go and we'll look at how do you actually do financial analysis with this. We'll pull up some data and analyze about 10,000 records of sales. We'll go in. I forgot to tell you the last time about how you actually get to this, because not a lot of people know this is here, but you have 2 different modes when you start into ChatGPT. You also have these interpreters and these plugins that you have to enable because they're beta features right now. Once you've got them, you can go turn them on. We'll put in the 10,000 sheets. Then we'll see what kind of information it can tell us about this particular file. So it knows just by reading the information that it's a sales order data set, and it's got rows and orders and columns and sales, product names, discounts, profits, etc. So I'm going to ask about which ones should I promote and what kinds of trends or regional analysis, profitability actually do, and whatever it thinks is interesting. My wife laughs when I'm very verbose. The more verbose you are, the better the answers you get, because it understands nuance. So based on this, it says, hey, here are 5 different ways we can look at this. And we'll just begin, starting with the top 10 selling. Here's the top 10 sellers, and here's the top 10 most profitable products. Then it's going to look at those over time. It's going to produce some charts actually showing what that looks like for sales over time, by year, and by region. If I wanted, I could have it do it by color and say, make these colors match this. But for the purposes of demonstration, I just want you to see what's possible. Now it's giving profit margin by category, and look at furniture's not so great. Down in the central region, they actually have some negative numbers. That's not cool. We'll go and investigate that a little bit. Now it's doing some distributions by category, and these are charts I've never actually used myself, but I'm sure they're interesting to someone. These are things that it is coming up with. You see, I haven't asked it for any of this other than just tell me what you find interesting. Now it's telling me about the distribution for the various areas, and it's giving me its summary. It seems like technology has higher gross profits and sales. There's more variability in these amounts, I'm sorry. So what are some of those outliers that we noticed there? Which products should we promote to maximize profitability? Are there any others that maybe we should discontinue? These are good questions to ask, or to be more profitable. Okay. All right. It's very polite. It'll come in and it'll tell you why it's going to do what it's going to do, and how correlation does not necessarily mean causation. And just because it has a negative profit doesn't mean it's not a viable product. Maybe it's a loss leader. There's a lot of reasons why you might have low profitability products or services. But it's going to go, and here's the top 10 by the highest profit margins. And then here's the negative profit margins. And so what kind of visual analysis can you perform on this data set? It'll tell us these are all different kinds of things that it can do. Time series, geographic correlations, customer segmentation, product performance. You can actually just talk to it just by using the numbers. So I'll just say 2, 3, 5, and 6. Go into that. Now it's giving me some pie charts, some distributions, a nice little long tail there. Yeah, just basic distributions, California and New York. You can see there's some outliers there that we'll be curious about. Here's profit by sales. And then here's the visualizations that I asked for. And then it actually is describing those visualizations. If you think about that, that's a lot of work that you have to go and take something in and then kind of regurgitate it back in a meaningful way. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with those high profit and low profit areas of those losses. So yeah, it's showing both sales and profit. It's explaining that it's got a lot of information here. And now it's going through and saying, okay, here's some products that we may want to look at. The 5 low profit loss making ones are here. And they happen to be, the good ones are in the technology space and the bad ones are in furniture. So we could decide if we wanted to rethink furniture, if that was something we were interested in. How would eliminating furniture affect our profitability of each of the regions? Okay. So it actually is the forecasting I was talking about and the budgeting. You can go and say, okay, if you did that, what would it do? And the beauty of these AIs is they have infinite patience and are incredibly persistent. And so it doesn't matter how many times we go back and iterate on that, it'll be okay. So now let's take that to the next level. If you're like me, that kind of reminds me of the late 80s with respect to state-of-the-art technology. Even though it's fast and impressive, it was all very text-based. And if you couldn't type or weren't very fast, et cetera, that was kind of annoying. So taking it up a notch, we'll go to the next level. And that's what we see Microsoft has really done with the launch of their new Copilot and Enterprise Bing products. Satya Nadella is Microsoft's CEO, and he talks about how language is the new user interface, and conversational chatbots are going to be the new apps. You really are going to want to have conversations with your applications, and that's why they've they've invested over $10 billion just in the last year in artificial intelligence. And between them and IBM, Apple, Meta, and Google, they all spent over $1 trillion working on this technology, getting it to the point where it's actually at today. With that, they've announced a new product called Copilot. And no, this is not a resurgence of clipping from the 90s. It's literally an entirely new way of working. And they're integrating Copilot, which is using the power of ChatGPT and generative AI underneath it to allow you to interact with a variety of different software packages, including all of the Microsoft packages that you use on a daily basis, Word and Outlook. You can tell it to actually do things and say, okay, I want you to go create an announcement, and it'll go and it'll create that. You can tell it, okay, take this information and turn it into a press release or turn it into a job posting. And just by talking to it, it will actually do the things you want it to do. And you can tell it, create presentations and go and take this information from this presentation and turn it into a spreadsheet. And vice versa. We'll actually show you what this looks like to basically have the power of expert programmers at your beck and call. And essentially, this product is going to be rolled out worldwide. It's starting to be deployed now. We're one of the few partners that actually has access to this systems right now. We're one of 1.25% that have that capability. And I'll show you what that looks like in Power BI. So Power BI is Microsoft's part of their Power Platform, and it's the business intelligence system that allows you to create kind of what if scenarios and dashboards that everybody loves. One thing I want to describe to you, up until now, many companies have forbidden the use of ChatGPT and some of these other AIs because of getting the information out into the wild. So not having control of that and being on your premise. But now Microsoft has put together a way that you can use Power BI with Copilot inside your data center or inside your premises, either in your tenant in the cloud or just internal. So no data ever actually leaves your control. With that, we'll get into creating a thing with Power BI and the dashboard. Here, I want to build a report that's got trends and sources for new and returning customers over the last 12 months. And I needed to slice and dice and to create summaries of new versus returning. And then also, what kind of customers do I have based on the orders they made? It's going to do some segmentation. Hit enter. Literally, that's all I had to do was tell it what I wanted. It goes out based on all that information that it was doing in the back end. It says, okay, here are things that I think would make sense and that people typically like to see in dashboards. Here you can see you've got customers by country and by sales, by segment. We've got those that are coming to our website versus those that come via email or some other ways. And all of that was done just with the spoken word. Next, we'll go looking at invoice processing and this notion of process mining. In this, we're going to set up a process and go start to investigate what's going on with this thing. Okay, so here we're at Power Automate, which is another one of the Power Platform tools. We're going to create a simple little invoice application, pull in some data here. Don't worry about all these details. It's not worth it for now. Basically, it goes in and reads it and looks at the different processes. In this particular case, this customer is actually using SAP on the back end as their ERP. You can see here we've got a distribution of the amount of invoices that are going through certain paths in their process. You'll see that big red thing there in the middle. That's actually showing where the bottleneck is. We're going to look and see. Looks like we've got about $10 million worth of invoices are coming through this exception process. The green process in the middle, that's the happy path. That's the one that everybody should be following. But this one over here, we're going to see what's going on with that. So we're going to go and look at it in the review. Now we see, for some reason, these things are delegated. Why are these being delegated? We can go and look. Let's go back and check this out quick. All right. This is kind of a distribution of root cause analysis of those different files and why they went through those different paths. This is showing us the program, the Power Flow of what happens with that information and how the flow actually works and where it goes from where. And lastly, it's integrated with the Teams applications. You can get this information in Teams and share it with your coworkers or your staff or whomever to go in and look at and analyze that information. So you can figure out where is all your time being spent, where's the money going, how is it being sent throughout the organization, and is there anything we can do to speed that up? Okay, I know it's going a bit fast, but we've got a lot to get through. The next one, we're going to go take the procure to pay process and do a similar thing. We're going to go through and look at that same process again. We're going to go and dive deeper. We're going to ask Copilot, which is over here on the right, what does it think we should do? Because it's going to have some ideas. The fact that it's highlighting those two nodes there in the middle towards the left, it has a sense of something. We're going to go and say, let's provide the top insights. Go in here and zoom in here so you can read this. Some of these have taken a really long time. And that's really long. There's been 12 of those. We also have some other activities that are very repetitive, and it's saying it thinks it knows where the bottleneck is. It wants to show us. So it's going to bring us here, and turns out the processes, the purchase orders without an existing purchase requisition are out of compliance. That can be a bad thing. So there's somebody out there going rogue and buying things outside the process. Now I've chosen to have it create a flow or update the application to let us remedy that problem. We'll click into that, and this will show you the development environment for Power Apps. You'll see here we're working with the SAP plugin for that. And SAP is just one of the many different ERP systems that we have the ability to integrate with. There's over 98 of them. Everything from JD Edwards, Oracle, PeopleSoft, SAP. So there's a bunch of them that are already built in that we can access. All right, so we've shown you a lot of demos. Now we want to talk about some of the ROIs. And what does this really mean? One of the customers we worked with had a three-way matching problem, as does practically everyone. We helped build a AI-driven auto-reconciler. And the problem statement from the customer was, seeing financial data sucks. And I can vouch for that. Because they would get in things, orders from statuses and POs via PDFs and Excel and emails. They'd get things in the mail, God help us, faxes, you name it. Basically, they had 10 people doing this on a full-time basis. This is a multi-$100 million conglomerate company. And we built them a automation system that would import and scan that information in. And once it was in, it would identify the various pieces of information out here. Now, you would think in 2023, everybody's doing electronic interfaces, right? No. The vast majority of the world still works on spreadsheets and email. That's just the way it is. For those that we get into the system, we have a straight-through process that if we feel very confident, if the confidence is greater than 70%, we started off at a higher percent, like 90%, and we've got more and more confident as we had experience with the system. We knew that it was working well. We were actually getting better quality than what was happening with the humans that were working on it. When it wasn't super sure that what it was, if it had some sort of issues around 30% of it, wasn't quite sure, maybe something was scribbled on the invoice or whatnot, it would send it to a queue in the user's Microsoft Teams space. They could go and actually work that queue and resolve any of the issues. As soon as they did, it would go into their ERP system. In this case, the ERP system happened to be JD Edwards, but doesn't matter. If you want to find out more about that system, we've got this QR code here you can scan to get more detailed on that. There's a whole story behind it. But quick win, it was 76% ROI in less than 6 months, saving them over $300,000 a year. This was now processing over 95% of all their revenue, which is about $150 million a year. They took those 10 people that were doing that down to one person that's doing it part-time. Those other 9 people were redeployed to areas where they could actually use their creativity and do something less mundane. So that's a good story. How do you begin? Really, it starts very simply. Just review your current situation, look for some intelligence. What are you already doing in your organization? What are others in your role, in your industry doing? Potentially, what are your competitors doing? You can find those answers out by using Bing and Bard or ChatGPT. One of the issues with ChatGPT today is it doesn't have up-to-date current information unless you use some of those plugins. That's just something to be aware of. You want to go out and enlist your stakeholders. Find out who are those people that are going to be your champions or detractors and try to win them over. Look for those quick wins. We call it the low-hanging fruit. Particularly target those painful processes that are really labor intensive or require brute force processing, or those areas that you have low quality outcomes. Once you've done that, I encourage you to work with your team to brainstorm opportunities. I'll show you an example of what that looks like. Really kind of assess the feasibility, figure out what does the cost justification need to be, what does the ROI need to be, how do we establish ground truth and baseline the business so we have the understanding of the budget and the costs and constraints. And speaking of ground truth, one of the things I encourage is while you're looking up in the trees for the low-hanging fruit, don't forget to think about the fruit that you're stepping over that you already have that you could resolve immediately. One of the things we like to do is help customers use their existing licenses to do things without having to go out and spend a gazillion dollars to get some expensive AI RPA solution. Many people already have these tools. People use Microsoft Teams, Outlook, and they have the Power Platform depending on their licensing. That's a very inexpensive way to get going. Last but not least, I encourage you to think big, start small, and do a MVP or a minimal viable product or test Copilot. Some of you may already be eligible to do that today. You want to go as fast as you can. The notion of failing fast is you want to try to figure out what do you not know. Because as I often advise, you don't know what you don't know until after you've done it. And afterwards you realize, oh, I could do it better this way. That's how we talk about learning and iterating. And of course, rinse and repeat. So we've talked a good bit about the different areas from forecasting to audit and compliance. We've gone through enhanced forecasting and decision-making, going through looking at efficiency improvements, how you can identify those areas, doing fraud detection. We've got procurement automation and optimization, thinking about if you're having trouble with your supply chain and certain vendors or suppliers aren't able to meet up with your demand, go out and find others. There's more ways than one. You don't have to go to conferences or go out and physically meet with folks. You can actually use search now that's part of Bing and get real-time information with current information as well. Real-time reporting and analysis, that's going to become more useful as more people get to real-time systems. You won't have to have these large batch delays like you did in the past. And if you're in one of those environments, that's one of the things we help customers do is transition to the modern world. We've shared with you about advanced analytics and conversational AI. Expense automation is one of my favorites. There's so much that can be done now to basically make managing expenses extremely straightforward for your end users as well as your managers. Last but not least, audit and tax compliance. Think about a system that gets smarter over time and is up to date with all the latest and greatest laws and compliance and regulations. You essentially have an expert at your beck and call. So here are some details of that. We'll get you that in the presentation. I'm not going to go through all that here. This is an example of what I mean by brainstorming with your team, because no matter how you look at it, your team will be affected and you will be affected by the advent of AI. It truly changes everything. Like I was telling Jim earlier, I've been in the computer industry for a long time, and this is one of the most exciting times that I've experienced in IT. It's a fascinating time to be here doing what we're doing. For those folks that are kind of scared about it, lots of folks are worried about losing their jobs. Think of it, it's an opportunity for growth, a chance to learn new skills. It's an opportunity for you to showcase your savings and your value to the organization, as well as a chance to do more interesting work. As an example, you wouldn't think it, but one of the customers that I met with after the last webinar went through and took my advice, and they did a brainstorming session with the payroll department. And they came up with literally pages of information, of ideas, some of them mundane, trivial, others not so much. I was really pleased with that because it really sparked some creativity. And don't think that even a small little nitpicky thing isn't a big deal. If you save somebody 5 or 10 minutes a day, and you do that for the rest of the year, and there's a bunch of people that have that same issue, you have created increased productivity orders of magnitudes better than some of the systems people have implemented. Hopefully, you feel like we've gone through these different areas. We want to turn those areas of waste and improvements to areas that you can actually go and work on. So if there's one thing that I leave you with today, it's don't be afraid. Actually use the AI, but do it for good. There's plenty of good, positive ways of using AI. You don't have to destroy the human race. There's lots of information that we can unlock in the organization. I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
All right, thank you. What you'll see here on this screen now are 3 QR codes. There are case studies that you've looked at today, and just encourage you to get out your phones right now while we're wrapping up here. We'll get into questions in a moment, and just have a look at those. Those put some more detail to what Frank has processed. And is there one more slide with contact information for you? There
Yes.
you go. Okay. Oh yeah, there's more case studies right there. And when you flip up to the next one, I'm going to run over to questions, Frank, because we got a bunch in the Q&A, and we'll do these for about 10 minutes and then close up and offer our thanks to everybody who's attended. So Frank, the first question is, how can we ensure that incorporating generative AI into our systems won't compromise our sensitive information, like spreadsheets, client records, and confidential financial information? What do you think about that, Frank?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. One of the ways that I was initially doing it back before we had all the capability to have it in-house was I would obfuscate my data. And what I mean by that is I would actually hide and take away all of the personally identifiable or client identifiable information and just put generic information out there so I could analyze it. That was kind of one way, not the best way, but a way. A better way is to use the new tools where you can have it inside your firewall, like that one demonstration where I talked about it never leaving your premise. The beauty of many of these back-end systems is there's this notion of open source. And not everybody knows what that means, but it essentially means it's free and many people use it, and you kind of use it at your own risk, if you will. But it isn't necessarily always the easiest thing to do. So there are organizations out there, such as ours, that will help you go through and do that kind of work so that you can make sure that you've got your security in place and keep your security officer happy.
Yes. Before we get to the next question, this slide has an access with a QR code to Frank's calendar. And we have a limited number of spaces on his calendar that we're making available for people for a free 45-minute consultation with him. So grab your phones again and go ahead and get on his calendar and see how Frank can help you. Frank, let's go on to the next question. You demonstrated how ChatGPT can be integrated. Is it possible to have ChatGPT run in tandem with our existing accounting system? Would utilizing Power BI with Copilot enhance this integration? What do you think, Frank?
Yes, that is absolutely doable. A lot depends on the state of your existing systems and how complicated it will be to interface with. If you have, many organizations have done a lot of customizations to their accounting systems and their back-end ERPs. That plays a big factor. But again, like I mentioned, there's a lot of different adapters and ways of connecting in. There's also many ways of interfacing without having to go in and make major changes to your systems. We can actually act as if we're an existing process, either from a personnel perspective or from an email perspective. But one of the things you saw I did was went through and I used ChatGPT to look at different spreadsheets and things. I didn't go into the demo going and doing the analysis with Ford and Tesla and GM, but it went through and it used a plugin to pull in additional data from the internet in real time in 2023. The problem was, because it was in one plugin, the other application was using code interpreter, and the two shall never meet inside of GPT as it is today. That could be a future opportunity, but that's where you would bring in somebody that knows how to make these systems do their bidding and connect those pieces together. In fact, some of the companies we work with have multiple back-end engines where they have a generative AI for one capability, and then they have a machine learning statistical algorithm and a neural network for some machine learning, managing shop factory floors, etc. So there's a way to mix and match these, but it's not something that you get out of the box per se.
Right. Okay. New topic, budgeting. This question just came in. It says, when it comes to rethinking the traditional budgeting process, how can we use ChatGPT for more efficient planning and forecasting?
Absolutely. I remember back to when I was a younger man with less virtual gray hair, and my first budgeting season, I had to go back to the drawing board literally 4 different times because I'd come up with, here's my thinking, this is what I want to do, this is my budget, etc. And they said, oh yeah, but nope. Now that we've gotten everybody's budgets in, we know that we have to go back and shave 6%. I had to go back and do that. And everybody had to go back and make all their adjustments to come back. And then we went through round after round of doing that. And it was just laborious and tedious. I actually knew how to make the spreadsheets do what I wanted. And so many others didn't necessarily have that capability. It ended up taking a lot of people's time and energy. And it was very frustrating. Now you can go and take that same process and say, okay, everybody go generate your budgets. I can literally just tell Copilot, hey, put together a budget based on last year, show me the actuals versus the budgets, how far are we off? And now let's play some scenarios where we take 3 different variables across 3 different types of situations and give me all 9 of those. To tell you to go give you 9 projections with different sets of assumptions, that some people would just rather claw their eyes out. But this is actually something you can do quite easily and have it come back and say, okay, what's the best case scenario? What's the high scenario? What's the worst case scenario?
Well, we can all become data scientists in some ways, Ken, and with this good tool. So while you're taking another sip there, I've got one last question here, and it's about a vendor question on procurement. So what role can AI play in enhancing vendor management and negotiation within procurement departments? What do you think about that? That's a big
Excellent.
one.
Well, one of the customers we're working with, we've been working with them on their spend. So it, like many other customers we deal with, have been on a acquisition spree of late. The last several years, they've been growing through acquisition and merger. And many organizations are fairly good at the acquisition part of things, not so good at the merger part. We've been going in and looking and saying, gosh, how many different accounts do you really need with Home Depot? Or how many accounts do you really need with PayPal? And any number of these things. Individually, the different fiefdoms only see what they see, but at a corporate HQ level, you're going to see the entire big picture. On this one case, we were able to find $6 million in savings just on rebates alone. If you go and you look at that across all of your spend, I've got some pretty hairy, ugly spreadsheets on my machine where I've been looking at that. Just the opportunity to streamline and to now go back and have better negotiation powers with the vendors.
Right.
It gives you a tremendous amount of leverage.
That's fantastic. Okay, Frank, thank you so much. And do you mind putting up the slide with your contact information one more time?
Sure.
Okay, so in line with our commitment to respect your time, we have kept within our 60-minute time frame, but the conversation doesn't stop here. Every attendee and registrant will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording of this webinar and a link to Frank's calendar. You can revisit the insights shared today at your convenience and even share it with your colleagues who couldn't join us live. Looking ahead, we're excited to announce that Softura's next webinar in the AI in Action series will take place in late September. We'll dive even deeper into the potentials of AI and generative technologies, discussing how they can revolutionize your business processes. Attendees will receive an invitation to the next event, and we do hope to see you there. On behalf of Softura, we'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for attending this webinar. Your engagement and participation are what makes these events worthwhile. Have a great evening. Thank you very much from the team at Softura. Thank you, Frank.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.